My son-in-law looked me dead in the eye across the dinner table and said, "Drink up, old man. I made it especially for you." And he smiled. Not the kind of smile that reaches a man's eyes, the kind that lives only on the mouth. I was 63 years old, a retired pharmacist, and I had spent 4 decades reading people the way other men read the newspaper. I knew what that smile meant. I just didn't know yet how far he was willing to go. Let me back up. My name is Lawrence. I spent 38 years as a licensed pharmacist in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I retired at 61 with a paid-off house, a modest pension, and what I thought was a good life ahead of me. My wife, June, had passed 4 years earlier, breast cancer, 18 months from diagnosis to the end, and since then I had been learning, slowly, how to live alone in a house that used to have 2 people in it. My daughter Cassandra was the light of that house. She always had been. Even after her mother died, she would drive over on Sunday mornings and we would sit on the back porch with coffee and not even talk much, just sit. She was 41. She had her mother's eyes, and I always told her mother's stubborn streak too. She worked as an office manager for a dental practice in Metairie. She was steady, sensible, the kind of person you want in your corner when things get hard. Then she met Rowan. He came into her life about 3 years ago. Tall, well-dressed, always had a story going. He sold commercial real estate, or said he did. He talked about deals closing, clients flying in, commissions pending. He drove a leased BMW and wore a watch I later found out he'd bought on a credit card with a $2,000 limit and had never paid off. I didn't know any of that at first. At first, I just noticed that he had the particular energy of a man who needs you to believe he's doing better than he is. I mentioned it to Cassandra once, gently. She told me I was being unfair, that I hadn't given him a chance, that she was happy. I let it go. You'll have to, with your kids. They are not yours to steer forever. They got married 14 months after they met. Small ceremony, nice enough, outdoor venue on the North Shore. I paid for half of it because Rowan said he was waiting on a commission to clear. It never did as far as I could tell. 6 months after the wedding, Cassandra called me on a Tuesday night. She said Rowan had lost a big deal, that they were behind on rent, that it was just temporary. She asked if they could stay with me for a little while, just until things stabilized. I said yes without hesitating. She was my daughter. They moved in on a Saturday with 2 carloads of stuff and a storage unit key. I gave them the master bedroom and took the smaller room down the hall. Rowan carried boxes with the look of a man doing me a favor. He set up his laptop at my kitchen table like he owned the room and started taking calls at all hours, pacing the backyard in the dark, voice low and tense. The first month was manageable. The second month, small things started to bother me. He would help himself to my bourbon without asking. He left dishes in the sink and acted vaguely inconvenienced when I mentioned it. He borrowed my truck one afternoon and brought it back with a quarter tank less gas and said nothing about it. The third month was when I started to understand what kind of man he actually was. I came home early from a doctor's appointment one afternoon. Nothing serious, just a follow-up on my blood pressure. And I could hear him on the phone in the backyard. The sliding glass door was cracked open. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard him anyway. He was talking about the house. "It's worth at least $480," he said. "Maybe $5 if the market moves right. The old man's got no mortgage on it. Clean title. I've seen the paperwork." I stood very still in my kitchen. My house. He was talking about my house like it was an asset he was assessing. I closed the door quietly and went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. I didn't say anything that evening. I needed to think. I needed to watch. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. Rowan had started being nicer to me. which sounds like a good thing but felt like the opposite. He would ask about my day. He would offer to pick things up from the grocery store. He called me Dad for the first time, which made my stomach turn in a way I couldn't fully explain at the time. Cassandra seemed happier too, or maybe just more relaxed. I wondered if she was in on it. I hated that. I wondered that. I pushed the thought away. Then one Sunday, he made dinner. He had never cooked before, not once in the months he had been living in my house. So when I came downstairs that evening and found him at the stove, apron on, acting like this was the most natural thing in the world, I noticed. He made a jambalaya, rich and fragrant. He set the table carefully, poured sweet tea, said he wanted to do something nice. Cassandra looked pleased. I sat down. He put a bowl in front of me with both hands, like he was presenting something ceremonial. He sat across from me with a small smile. "Eat up, old man," he said. "Made it especially for you." I looked at the bowl. Then I looked at his face. 38 years as a pharmacist teaches you things. It teaches you to be precise, to notice detail, to take nothing at face value. It also, if you work long enough, teaches you to recognize certain smells. Not always consciously. Sometimes it's a flicker, a familiarity your brain registers before your mouth can name it. Something in that bowl smelled familiar. Not the shrimp, not the andouille, not the okra. Something underneath all of that. Something faintly bitter and chemical that had no business being in food. I did not pick up my spoon. I made a small show of reaching for my phone, said I'd gotten a text, excused myself to the bathroom. I washed my hands slowly, looked at my own face in the mirror, and thought carefully about what I was going to do next. When I came back to the table, I sat down and made a production of adjusting my napkin and reaching past my bowl to grab the salt shaker, and in the process, very naturally, the way you do when you're not thinking about it, I slid my bowl a few inches and angled Rowan's closer to me. And then, when he looked down at something on his phone, I switched them. It took less than 3 seconds. I ate slowly, his bowl, my eyes on him the whole time. He took a big spoonful, then another. He talked about some deal he was supposedly closing in Shreveport. He poured more sweet tea. He finished most of his bowl and seemed fine. I did not touch what had been my bowl. Later that night, after they had gone upstairs, I went to the kitchen and sealed the untouched bowl in 2 Ziploc bags and put it in the back of the refrigerator behind a container of leftover soup. I wrote the date on the bag with a Sharpie. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I drove to a drugstore across town and bought a small notebook. I started writing everything down, dates, times, what was said, what I observed. I had kept patient medication logs for nearly 4 decades. I knew how to document. I knew that if it ever came to it, what you'd written in real time mattered more than what you remembered later. I also called an old friend named Dr. Ballard. We'd worked together years ago when I was still at the hospital. I asked him, without explaining why, what compounds could be introduced into food to cause gradual cardiac symptoms in an older man. Symptoms that might look on paper like natural deterioration. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked me if I needed help. I told him not yet. He told me what I needed to know. Digoxin. At elevated doses administered over time, it would cause fatigue, nausea, heart arrhythmia. In an older man with a blood pressure history, it could kill without raising immediate suspicion. It was the kind of drug that, absent a specific toxicology screen, a medical examiner might never think to test for. I sat in my car in a Walgreens parking lot and absorbed that. Then I drove to a UPS store and rented a P.O. box. I went home, and that evening, after Cassandra and Rowan had gone to bed, I went through the desk in the spare room, my spare room, the one Rowan had been using as an office, quietly, carefully, not moving anything out of place. The second drawer had a manila folder. Inside the folder was a printed email thread. The emails were between Rowan and a woman I didn't recognize. The woman appeared to be a notary. The thread discussed, in careful but unmistakable terms, a durable power of attorney document, the kind that would give Rowan legal authority over my finances and property. The most recent email, dated 9 days ago, said, "Just need the signature. Once it's notarized, we can move forward with the refinancing application." My house. They were planning to refinance my house without telling me, using a document I had never signed. I photographed every page with my phone. I put the folder back exactly as I found it. I went to my room and locked the door. The next morning, I called a real estate attorney in New Orleans. Not the one I'd used before. Someone new. Someone Rowan would have no way to know about. I explained the situation. She was a sharp woman, all business, and she didn't waste my time with reassurances. She told me to bring in everything I had and not to confront anyone until we had a strategy. I drove out there that Thursday while Cassandra was at work, and Rowan was supposedly in Shreveport. She looked at the photographs and the notes I'd written. She told me that what I was describing, if provable, constituted elder financial abuse under Louisiana law. A felony. Forged power of attorney documents carried additional charges. She told me I should also consider contacting the district attorney's office. She helped me file an immediate freeze on any refinancing applications tied to my property through the parish clerk's office. It was a quiet administrative step. Rowan would have no way to know until he tried to move forward. I kept coming home every evening. I kept eating dinner. I kept watching. 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday night, Cassandra knocked on my bedroom door after Rowan had gone downstairs to watch television. She sat on the edge of my desk chair and was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Dad, I need to tell you something." My heart was pounding. I waited. She said she had found paperwork on Rowan's laptop, a loan application for $240,000 against my house. She said she had confronted him about it that afternoon. She said she hadn't known. She was crying before she finished the sentence. I looked at my daughter, and I made myself believe her. Not because it was easy, because I knew her, and I knew her mother, and because the way she was crying was not the way a person cries when they've been caught. It was the way a person cries when the floor has dropped out from under them. I told her to go downstairs and act normal. I told her not to say anything to Rowan that night. I told her I needed 48 hours. She looked at me and nodded. She wiped her eyes and went. I called my attorney that night. I called Dr. Ballard. And I called my neighbor Theodore, who had been a detective with the Baton Rouge Police Department for 22 years before he retired. I had helped his mother manage her medications for years. He owed me nothing, but he came over the next morning and sat at my kitchen table and listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "You've got enough." He made a call. 2 days later, I was sitting in an interview room at the parish DA's office with my attorney, and every photograph, every note, every date and detail I had written in that small notebook over 3 weeks. On a Friday morning, 11 days after that meeting, 2 detectives and a sheriff's deputy came to my house while I was sitting on the front porch with a cup of coffee. They had a warrant. Rowan came downstairs in a t-shirt and looked at the officers at my front door and then looked at me. His face did something I don't have a word for. It wasn't quite shock. It was more like a man watching something he built fall apart and knowing, somewhere he'd always known, that it was going to. "You did this," he said to me. "You tried to put my name on a forged document," I said. "You tried to take my house, and I believe you put something in my food." He didn't deny it. That was the thing. He didn't say a single word of denial. He just turned away and let the detective take his arm. The DA sent the bowl I had saved, still sealed in that Ziploc bag in the back of my refrigerator, to the state crime lab. It came back 3 weeks later. digoxin, concentration well above therapeutic range. Cassandra gave a full statement. She turned over the laptop. She testified at the preliminary hearing. She moved out of my house 2 weeks after Rowan's arrest and into an apartment in Mid-City that she found with help from her cousin. She called me every Sunday, same as always. We went back to sitting on the back porch when the weather allowed. We didn't talk about it much. Some things you put down and you just carry the weight of having put them down. Rowan was charged with attempted second-degree murder, elder financial exploitation, and conspiracy to commit mortgage fraud. The power of attorney document, when examined by a forensic handwriting specialist, showed my signature had been traced from a document I'd signed 6 years earlier. The notary whose name was on the paperwork had never met me. She'd been told it was a standard business authorization. He pled not guilty. His trial took 4 days. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. 18 years. That was the sentence. The judge, a woman in her late 50s who had been on the bench for over a decade, looked at Rowan before she read it and said that crimes against elderly family members represented a particular kind of cruelty, that the calculated, sustained nature of what he had done warranted the full weight of the sentence she was imposing. I sat in that courtroom and felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, not relief exactly. Something more like stillness, like a noise that had been running in the background for months had finally gone quiet. My attorney filed a civil suit on top of the criminal case. We won a judgment for legal fees, court costs, and damages tied to the emotional and financial harm of the attempted fraud. Rowan had no real assets, the BMW was leased, the accounts were overdrawn, but the judgment stood on his record. I had my house. I had my name on my property, where it had always been. I had my daughter, carefully, in the way you rebuild things that have been damaged. Not the same as before, but present, and real, and trying. Theodore came over the evening after sentencing, and we sat on the porch, and he brought a bottle of Maker's Mark and poured 2 glasses and didn't say anything ceremonial about it. We just sat there as the light went down and the neighborhood got quiet. You kept your head, he said after a while. I thought about the night I sat in my car in that Walgreens parking lot and felt the full weight of what was being done to me. I thought about how badly I had wanted to walk back into my house and say everything I knew out loud, consequences be damned. I thought about how I hadn't, how I'd written it down instead, how I'd driven to a notary and documented and photographed and waited and trusted the process, even when trusting the process felt like the hardest thing in the world. I had good reasons to, I said. Theodore nodded and poured another glass. The house is quieter now than it was before any of this happened, but it's a different kind of quiet. It's mine. There's a night I keep coming back to. Not the day of the verdict, not the morning the detectives came to my door. The night I sat alone in my car in a Walgreens parking lot in the dark after Dr. Ballard told me what digoxin does to a man my age. I sat there for a long time, and I made a decision that I think more than anything else determined how all of this ended. I decided not to blow up. That sounds simple. It wasn't. Every part of me wanted to walk back into my house and say what I knew out loud, let the whole thing come apart in real time, consequences be damned. I was angry in a way I hadn't been since I was young. That deep, physical kind of angry that sits in your chest and makes your hands feel wrong. But I thought about 38 years of filling prescriptions. I thought about every time I had to slow down and check twice when I was tired or rushed because one wrong decimal point could end someone's life. I thought about the discipline that work had built in me, one careful day at a time, and I thought, use it. What Rowan was counting on, what people like him always count on, is that emotion will make you move too fast. He expected me to react. He'd probably planned for it. An old man who storms around accusing his son-in-law of poisoning him with no proof in his own house doesn't look like a victim. He looks like a problem. So I wrote things down instead. I documented, I photographed, I drove to a P.O. box and an attorney's office, and I did the slow, unglamorous work of building something solid. That's what intelligence actually looks like in real life. Not cleverness, not being the smartest person in the room. It's the willingness to think past your feelings long enough to act with precision. And Cassandra, I think about what it cost her to knock on my door that Wednesday night, to sit in that chair and tell me what she'd found, knowing I might not believe her, knowing she'd married him, knowing some part of whatever came next would follow her for years. She did it anyway. That took a kind of moral backbone that I don't think gets talked about enough. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that looks good in a story, but the quiet kind where you tell the truth when it would be easier and safer to stay quiet. I'm proud of her for that. I told her so, eventually. Rowan got 18 years because he chose to treat another person's life as a transaction. He did it step by step, calculation by calculation, and the thing about that kind of plan is that it requires you to keep going even when your conscience offers you a way out. He had dozens of off-ramps. He took none of them. That's not bad luck. That's a choice a man makes repeatedly, and the consequences that follow are the natural shape of those choices. I think about what I want the rest of my life to look like. I think about doing right by people, not because it always pays off immediately, but because it compounds over time the way interest does, quietly, invisibly, until one day you look around and realize that the people who showed up when it mattered were people you had treated with care for years. Dr. Ballard, Theodore, my attorney. Cassandra, in the end. The house is mine. It always was. But I understand better now what that means. Not just the deed, not just the address. It means I built something over a lifetime, carefully and honestly, and when someone tried to take it, I had enough of myself left to fight back the right way. That's the only thing I'd want anyone to take from any of this. Not the revenge part. The other part. The sitting in the car and choosing to be steady.